Stop crying, my mother hissed, pushing me back against the hospital pillows. Do not be selfish, Elena. You were not using your uterus anyway. Think of it as a donation to save your sister's marriage. Finally, you are useful. I looked past her at the chart on the bedside table. It read embryo transfer successful. I had walked into this clinic for a routine cyst removal. I woke up pregnant. My family had not just lied to me. They had drugged me and stolen my body to produce an heir for my sister. The sedative was still heavy in my veins, making my limbs feel like lead. I stared at the intravenous drip, watching the clear liquid count down the seconds of my new reality. Panic would not save me. Screaming would only get me sedated further. If they wanted a vessel, I would be a vessel of poison. I lay in that recovery bed for hours, letting the anesthesia wear off, and the cold, hard truth settle in. You might wonder how a family gets to the point where they view one daughter as a princess and the other as an organ farm. It is a slow, methodical erosion of your humanity until you are nothing but a resource to be harvested. Growing up, Serena was the golden child. She was beautiful, charming, and groomed from birth to marry well. I was the practical one, the smart one, the one they leaned on when the bills were tight. While Serena was taking etiquette lessons, I was working double shifts to pay for my own textbooks. When I graduated and became a medical compliance auditor, my parents did not celebrate my career. They celebrated my steady paycheck. For the last 3 years, I have been the invisible foundation of this family. I paid off my father's gambling debts. I covered the mortgage when my mother overspent on Serena's wardrobe. I drove a 10-year-old car so that Serena could have the newest treatments at the fertility clinic. She had married Arthur Sterling, a man with old money and a desperate need for an heir, but she could not carry a pregnancy. I watched them spiral. I watched Serena cry at Sunday dinners, sobbing that her life was over if she could not produce a baby. I felt bad for her. I really did. But I did not realize that when they looked at me, they did not see a sister or a daughter. They saw a spare part. The betrayal started a month ago with Dr. Vance. He has been our family physician for 20 years. When I went to him complaining of abdominal pain, he told me I had precancerous cysts. He prescribed me pills to regulate my cycle before surgery. I took them religiously. I trusted him. I am a medical auditor. I catch fraud for a living. Yet I never thought to audit the man who treated my chickenpox. Those pills were not for cysts. They were high-dose estrogen and progesterone. I spent 4 weeks thickening my own uterine lining, preparing my body to be a host, thinking I was saving my health. The door to the recovery room opened again. My father walked in. He did not look ashamed. He looked annoyed, like I was a business deal that was dragging on too long. We invested in you for a rainy day, Elena, he said, standing at the foot of the bed. Well, it is raining. Serena brings home a CEO husband. You bring home paperwork. Now it is time to pay your rent. That was the moment the last thread of affection snapped. He did not see a crime. He saw a transaction. He thought he had trapped me. But he forgot what I do for a living. I trace discrepancies. I find the rot in the system and I cut it out. They had dragged me into their game. But they had forgotten that I am the one who writes the rules of compliance. 2 days later, they moved me into the guest house on the Sterling estate. To an outsider, it looked like a luxury retreat. To me, it was a prison cell. Serena and my mother supervised the move, checking my bags as if I were a flight risk. They took my car keys. They instructed the security guard at the gate that I was on strict bed rest and not to be let out. They thought they were containing a threat. They did not realize they were bringing the infection directly into the host body. By moving me onto the property, they gave me access to their Wi-Fi, their trash, their schedules, and most importantly, the husband they were lying to. I spent the first 24 hours pacing the room, letting the rage burn itself down into something colder and more useful. I needed them to stop watching me so closely. On the second morning, I asked to see my parents. They sat on the plush velvet sofa in the guest living room, looking wary. I am done fighting, I said, keeping my voice flat. I will carry the baby. I will sign the rights over to Serena. But I have conditions. My mother let out a breath of relief. We knew you would see reason, Elena. We are family. I want my student loans paid off, I interrupted. $68,420. I want the confirmation of payment in my hand by Friday, and I want a stipend for the time I am missing work. If you do that, I will sign whatever affidavit the lawyers draft. My father did not even hesitate. Done. Small price to pay for the future of this family. I watched the tension leave their shoulders. They exchanged a look of smug validation. To them, this confirmed everything they thought about me, that I was transactional, desperate, and easily bought. They did not see a woman plotting their destruction. They saw a poor relation accepting a handout. That arrogance was their first mistake. Later that afternoon, I overheard them talking in the garden. I told you she would come around, my father said. She just needed a financial incentive. It is not just the money, Frank, my mother replied, her voice soft, delusional. We are doing her a favor. Look at her life. She was aimless. We gave her a purpose. Years from now, she will look back at this and realize we saved her. I froze. They genuinely believed they were the heroes of this story. They had twisted their crime into an act of charity. That cognitive dissonance terrified me more than their cruelty. You cannot reason with people who believe their sins are virtues. I realized then that I could not just escape. I had to shatter their delusion. I had to drag their secrets into the light. On Thursday, I went back to the clinic for my mandatory checkup. Dr. Vance was all smiles. He checked my vitals and told me my hormone levels were stabilizing nicely. I will just go grab the nurse to schedule your next scan, he said, patting my shoulder before stepping out. The heavy door clicked shut. I looked at the computer terminal on his desk. The screen was still glowing. He had not logged out. I checked the clock. I had maybe 90 seconds before someone walked back in. I did not need to hack anything. I spent 3 years building the inventory tracking protocols for clinics exactly like this one. I knew the interface better than Vance did. I slid into his chair and went straight to the inventory management system. I pulled the discrepancy report for the date of my surgery. It was right there in black and white. Item dispensed. Lupron Depot. Inventory. Count. No change. Item dispensed. Wallace embryo transfer catheter. Inventory count. -1. He had billed the insurance for a cystectomy, but the inventory proved he had used a transfer catheter. He had altered the patient chart, but he had forgotten to scrub the supply chain logs. It is the first rule of auditing. People lie, but inventory does not. I hit export to PDF and emailed the file to a burner account I had set up that morning. I deleted the sent mail, cleared the temporary cache, and was back on the exam table before the doorknob turned. Back at the estate, I had the medical proof, but I needed the leverage. I needed something that would destroy Serena's narrative so completely that not even our parents could spin it. I had been watching Arthur and Serena. For a couple desperately trying to conceive, they were strangely distant. Arthur slept in the East Wing. Serena slept in the master suite. He had mentioned stress affecting his health years ago, and I started to wonder if the problem was not just Serena. If Arthur had fertility issues, and Serena was suddenly pregnant via a miraculous procedure using my body, whose genetic material was I actually carrying? I waited until Tuesday, when the cleaning staff did the deep clean of the East Wing. I knew Arthur left for the firm at 7 in the morning. I slipped into his bathroom. I grabbed the razor, sitting by the sink, a high-end cartridge razor, still damp from his morning shave. It would be packed with skin cells. I popped the cartridge off the handle and dropped it into a sterile specimen bag. I mailed it to a private forensic lab in Arizona that afternoon, along with a cheek swab I had taken for myself. I ordered an informational paternity test. The results hit my inbox 3 days later. Probability of paternity. 0%. The baby was not Arthur's. Serena had not just stolen my body. She had stolen a stranger's biology. She must have used a donor to ensure the pregnancy took, knowing Arthur's fertility was compromised. And she planned to pass the child off as the sterling heir to secure the trust fund. It was fraud on a massive scale. It was a breach of her prenuptial agreement. It was the silver bullet I had been praying for. The signing took place on a Tuesday morning in the boardroom of Sterling & Associates, Arthur's family law firm. The room was designed to intimidate, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. I sat at the far end, away from the main action. My parents were seated near the front, beaming. To them, this was not a legal proceeding. It was a coronation. Serena sat next to Arthur. She was glowing, radiant in a cream-colored dress. She looked every inch the mother-to-be. Mr. Sterling Sr.'s personal attorney, a man named Gable, slid a stack of documents across the table. These are the standard heirship affidavits, Gable said. And the release forms for the trust. Once signed, the initial disbursement of $250,000 will be transferred within 48 hours. With the remaining trust assets vesting upon the birth of a living child, there is one final formality, Gable continued. The trust stipulates a mandatory paternity verification. Standard procedure for high-value estates. We will need a DNA sample from the child post-birth. Or a prenatal test now. The air in the room shifted. I saw Serena's spine stiffen. She knew. She had to know. You do not use a donor by accident. I watched her turn to Arthur. She did not panic. She smiled that soft, indulgent smile she used when she wanted something. "Oh, Arthur," she said, her voice light. "You know how you get around needles. Remember last year? You nearly fainted just getting a flu shot. Do we really need to put you through that stress right now? We know whose baby it is." She reached out and smoothed his lapel. We trust each other, don't we? It was a masterclass in manipulation. She targeted his weakness, his phobia, and wrapped it in his pride. Arthur hesitated, looking at the lawyer, then at his beautiful, pregnant wife. He let out a breath, his shoulders relaxing. Serena is right, Arthur said. We do not need the test. I acknowledge the child is mine. Let us just get the paperwork done. Very well, Gable said. If you waive the verification, you just need to sign the affidavit of paternity under penalty of perjury. He slid the final document towards Serena. Sign here, swearing that this child is the biological issue of Arthur Sterling. I sat perfectly still. My hand rested on the manila envelope in my lap. They felt safe. They felt untouchable. I watched Serena pick up the heavy, gold-plated pen. She lowered the tip to the paper. I did not speak. I needed the ink to hit the page. I needed the crime to be committed. The pen scratched against the paper. A wet, dark signature that sealed her fate. Serena lifted the pen with a flourish, handing the document to the notary. The notary applied her seal with a heavy, rhythmic thud. That sound was the final lock clicking into place. The crime was no longer theoretical. It was executed. Perjury. Fraud. Theft by deception. Mr. Gable reached for a heavy brass stamp on his desk, the trustee authorization. This was the key that would unlock the wire transfer. Before you authorize that transfer, counselor, I said, my voice cutting through the celebratory air like a scalpel. There is a compliance issue. The room went dead silent. 5 heads turned toward me. My mother looked at me with a mix of confusion and warning. Elena? Be quiet, she hissed. I ignored her. I stood up and slid the manila envelope across the mahogany table. It hissed against the wood, stopping inches from Gable's hand. I am a certified medical compliance auditor, I said, addressing the lawyer. That envelope contains 2 documents that materially affect the validity of that affidavit. Gable frowned, his hand hovering over the stamp. He looked at Arthur, then back at me. Slowly, he capped his pen and opened the envelope. Document A, I said, keeping my tone professional, is the official inventory audit from Dr. Vance's clinic on the date of my surgery. It proves that no cystectomy equipment was used. Instead, an embryo transfer catheter was removed from stock. I did not consent to that procedure. That makes this pregnancy the result of medical assault and kidnapping. Serena let out a strangled sound. She is crazy. She is hormonal. Arthur, do not listen to her. Gable did not look up. He was reading the audit log. His face had gone hard. Document B, I continued, is a forensic DNA report from a lab in Arizona. Since Arthur has a known aversion to medical tests, I facilitated one for him using a biological sample from his razor. The report compares the fetal DNA markers from my blood against Arthur's genetic profile. The probability of paternity is 0%. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. That is a lie! Serena shrieked, standing up so fast her chair tipped over. It is his! We are married! Arthur reached out and took the paper from Gable's hand. He read it. Then he set it down on the table with terrifying gentleness. He looked at Serena. He did not yell. He just looked at her as if she were a stranger. You knew, Arthur said. His voice was quiet, devoid of any warmth. You knew I was sterile. You knew I was too proud to admit it. And you used that against me. You traitor! My mother screamed, lunging across the table at me. You ungrateful, jealous little witch. You destroyed your sister. After everything we did for you. I looked at my mother. Her face was twisted in ugly, red rage. I spent 29 years setting myself on fire to keep you warm, I thought. I gave you my money. I gave you my time. I almost gave you my body. But ash does not make a foundation. Today, I stopped burning. I did not destroy her, I said coldly. She signed the paper. She destroyed herself. Gable cleared his throat. He picked up the affidavit Serena had just signed. Mrs. Sterling, Gable said, by signing this document with full knowledge that the child was conceived via donor, you have committed perjury. Furthermore, this act constitutes bad faith deception under Article 4 of your prenuptial agreement. The fidelity clause is triggered. The trust fund is locked. The marriage contract is voidable. You will leave this marriage with exactly what you brought into it. Nothing. My father slumped in his chair, his face gray. He realized the retirement plan, the status, the access to the Sterling fortune. It was all gone. Serena collapsed into her chair, sobbing. But it was not the pretty crying she used to manipulate people. It was the ugly, heaving sobs of someone who had gambled everything on a lie and lost. Arthur stood up. He walked to the door and opened it. He looked at my parents, then at Serena. Get out, he said. I stood up. My legs felt steady for the first time in months. I smoothed my skirt. I did not look at my parents. I looked directly at Arthur. I am keeping the baby, I said. It was not a question. Legally, this child is mine. Biologically, it has no relation to you. You have no claim. And Serena has no rights. I will be leaving now. Elena, wait! My mother lunged toward me, but security was already moving in. You cannot do this. We are your family. I do not have a family, I said. I have a biological origin. There is a difference. I walked out of the boardroom. I walked past the receptionist who was frantically typing, past the security guards who were escorting my father out, and into the elevator. The fallout was precise and devastating. Arthur filed for an annulment based on fraud, which was granted in record time. Because Serena had violated the fidelity clause of the prenuptial agreement, she left the marriage with exactly $0. The Sterling family also sued her for the cost of the fertility treatments and the legal fees, forcing her into personal bankruptcy. She moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a bad part of town, working retail to pay off debts that will likely outlive her. Dr. Vance fared worse. I sent the audit logs to the state medical board and the district attorney. He was indicted on 3 counts of insurance fraud, 1 count of medical assault, and 1 count of falsifying records. He lost his license permanently. He is currently serving 4 years in a federal facility. As for my parents, they learned that Arthur Sterling is not a man who forgives easily. He used his influence to blacklist my father's business from every major vendor in the state. They lost the house. They lost the country club membership. They lost the status they had sold their souls to keep. 6 months later, I received a letter. It had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from my mother. I stood in the kitchen of my new bungalow in Seattle, the morning rain tapping against the glass. I opened the envelope. It was 3 pages of guilt. She wrote about how hard their life was now. She wrote that they forgave me for ruining everything, and that they were willing to be a part of the baby's life if I sent them $5,000 to help with grandchild preparations. I read it twice. The old Elena would have felt guilty. She would have sent a check just to make the noise stop. But I am not that woman anymore. I walked to the shredder in my home office. I fed the letter into the machine and watched it turn into white confetti. I did not feel anger. I did not feel sadness. I felt absolutely nothing. It was the most peaceful feeling in the world. Elena. I turned around. Sarah, my neighbor, and the woman who had become more of a sister to me in 6 months than Serena had been in 30 years, was standing in the doorway holding 2 mugs of tea. Everything okay? She asked, eyeing the shredder. Perfect, I said. Just cleaning up some trash. I took the tea and walked out onto the porch. My hand rested on my stomach, heavy now with lights. A life that would never know it was a transaction. This is what I want you to understand. We are taught that family is a sacred bond that cannot be broken. We are taught that we owe our parents for our existence, that we owe our siblings our loyalty, no matter how much they take from us. That is a lie. Blood is just biology. Loyalty is earned. Love is an action, not an obligation. You are not a resource to be mined. You are not an insurance policy. If the people who are supposed to love you only value you when you are bleeding for them, they do not love you. They are feeding on you. And you have every right to stop the feast. I looked out at the gray, rainy skyline of my new city. I am alone in the way that matters, independent, safe, and free. I am Elena. I am the author of my own life. And the ink is finally dry.